Good evening, I'm Julia Hastie, and tonight I'm speaking to you from Roslyn Road Therapy Centre in my very own office in the garden. And I'm hoping over my shoulder here, you can see a beautiful diagram that goes into quite a lot of detail on the brain. And tonight I'm choosing to sit here because we're going to be speaking about stroke. All the experts this week will look at different angles. Dr. Nolwazi spoke last night about the medical aspects. And my role on the team is to talk about the mind and body aspects of different challenges that our people in our communities face. We take into consideration both the patient who's struggling with the disease, but also the caregiver, and looking at ways to really work as a team to support both. Now, when we spoke about obesity in the past, I suggested that for the caregiver to take into consideration the subject of discomfort. A person suffering from the disease of obesity probably has an uncomfortable body all the time. Walking, moving, breathing can be really challenging for an obese body. And emotionally, obesity comes with a lot of belief systems and judgments and fears from the patient, but sometimes also from the community. So if our key word for obesity is discomfort, and last week when we spoke about cancer, we said the key word would really be around fear and how a person might be in a lot of shock, both the caregiver and the patient, and have a lot to process and think about while dealing with this disease. When it comes to stroke, I would like to suggest that the key word to be aware of, both as the caregiver and the patient, is frustration. As Dr. Nolwazi explained very thoroughly yesterday, the different forms of strokes, and it's very typical for an otherwise previously healthy person to suddenly find a part of their brain not functioning anymore. They might have lost the ability to speak. They might have a side of the face or the body that no longer works. For example, they might have a hand that's doing this, and this is the hand that they worked with and used their whole life. As you can imagine, this is an incredibly frustrating process. Now, for the caregiver, that comes with frustrations too. What happens is a person's physical relationship will change and one's lifestyle will change. If you are used to a person feeding themselves, or speaking clearly and being able to communicate, suddenly a whole lot of new methods come into place. A person who could walk comfortably before may now be on crutches or a wheelchair or bedridden. So the caregiver has a big challenge in changes of physical daily lifestyle, and that can be frustrating. That would be normal to feel frustrated. For the patient, well, can you imagine the frustration of opening your mouth and wanting to say something and not being able to, or taking a bite of food and your face is twisted and you accidentally bite your tongue or your food falls out? Incredibly frustrating and challenging. And that, of course, lies on the mental health field. That is a mind challenge. That's not because of the brain injury. That's because of the effect of the brain injury, making it difficult to do things that were easy before. For the patient, not only are there these changes in their physical ability, but there's a lot of change in status and relationship. If you're not able to do work that you previously could, that's very, very challenging. It makes you think about yourself and your worth. If you were able to cook for your family and now you can't, that might be a lot of challenge in who am I and what is my duty and how can I execute my life now? So if we can have compassion, firstly, for the frustrations that come with brain injury, and of course, all the other feelings of shock and so on. Secondly, I would like to talk about the subject of neuroplasticity. It's a very popular word these days, but I'm not sure everyone is clear on what it means. So I've got this little cute brain toy, and I want you to just have a look and notice how just like plasticine or Play-Doh or Press-Stick might be able to move and change as you played with children. The most exciting news around about the brain is that it can change and grow all the time. As we heard from Dr. Nolwazi yesterday, once a person's had a stroke, there will be parts of the brain that are damaged, and very often they're damaged for life. However, we're not going to let that stop us. We're not going to let that challenge keep us from moving forward. It is not true. It is true to say you may never be exactly the same, but it's not true that you'll be stuck in the same place for the rest of your life because of this beautiful aspect of neuroplasticity. So, say for example, this part of your brain here or here has lost the ability of speech, or the ability to pick up something carefully, or the ability to hold a cup, or to use two hands together. Those changes are real, and by all means, that part of the brain has been injured. But the beauty of the neuroplastic brain is that new parts of the brain can take over that function. This is the wonderful news. The brain thrives on what we call frequency, intensity, and duration. Now, what is meant by that? If we give the brain work to do, it will thrive and strive and do its best to learn that work. And if the part of the brain that normally does that work can't, it will grow new pathways to take over that work. But it doesn't happen casually. It doesn't happen without some significant effort. So say, for example, well, let's go back a step. Let's say your patient or your family member has recently been injured. At first, we need compassion. At first, there will be a period of going through all the changes, what the person could do before and what they can do now. But let's not overlook the options of what they'll be able to do going forward. So let's say we've acclimatized to a person eating with a spoon or with their fingers or with the other hand. We'll acclimatize with that. And now we're going to say, so what are we going to do about this? And this is one of the challenges in caregiving. It takes a lot of time and effort to find the right way to work with this challenge. And let's say with the spoon, or a person has lost the ability to speak and you learn certain hand gestures, or maybe you have cards, or you use pointing to speak. That's the first step, but that's not the last step. The brain can learn and develop and grow with a frequency, intensity, and duration. And this is where we need to give special care to not get stuck into the mindset that once this injury has happened, it's stuck. The degree to which it can change is the degree to which we give new input. So maybe the person has learned to eat with their fingers or with their other hand. That's wonderful. We're now going to look out for that critical moment, that window, that opportunity to say, can we do more? Now, it's not just Julia who says that the brain is neuroplastic and change. I wanted to introduce two books that I keep right here in my office with me. The one is Struck by Genius. This young man was in his 30s when he had a brain injury, and it says, Jason was changed, but this time for the better. After Jason's brain injury, he was capable of incredible mathematical calculations, and he could see geometric forms wherever he went. So he had to learn how to deal with the world with a new brain, not necessarily a worse brain. And I really like that concept that when we're working with stroke, we're looking at a different brain and potentially a new brain, not just getting stuck in the injury. The second book I'd like to share with you is by a lady, a brain scientist called Jill Bolt Taylor, it's a PhD. And this book's called My Stroke of Insight. And there she was in her full-time job studying the brain and doing experiments and studies on the brain with her passion. And she had a stroke. And as it says here, Within hours, she could observe her own mind deteriorate. The left side of her brain had some functions, and the right side of her brain had completely different functions. Now, imagine this lady, a brain scientist. She actually understands what's going on, but she was unable to speak. And so she lay in this body, watching the different treatments come and go, watching the discussions around her. And I think that's quite an extreme example of the kind of thing that happens to our patients. The caregivers are jumping in and helping and coming up with plans. And sometimes the patient doesn't even have a voice or is not able to speak. And there might be times when that's just how it is, but we can't leave it there. We want to start as soon as it's stabilized, pushing, searching, finding a way. This lady recovered. It took her 8 years. 8 years, but she is a completely functional, healthy brain scientist again. And this is an emotional testimony that deep internal peace is accessible to anyone. And I thought that's just wonderful. We're going to look at this brain, and I want to go back to those 3 concepts: frequency, intensity, duration. Now, whether it's learning a new way of communicating, possibly a little bit of sign language, or pointing to cards, or starting to make sounds, a once-a-week effort is not going to do it. That brain is dealing with so much as it is, so much of change in how it was and how it is, so much of change of lifestyle, that a little bit of effort it's not going to touch sides. It's not going to go in. So there needs to be some kind of commitment. And of course, it is a huge challenge that not just daily, multiple times a day for a short spell, a new brain skill is going to be exercised. It might be giving the person a whole lot of pencils and practice picking up those pencils with both hands. And of course, the first time is going to be our keyword: frustrating for both. And we're going to immediately try again, maybe only for 5 minutes or 8 minutes, put it aside. 2 hours later, we're going to try again, and we're going to try again, and we're going to try again. Because as we're doing that, the brain, which is still mostly functional, except the hurt area, is going to grow new pathways. Imagine you wanted to learn a new language, and every 2 hours, all day, every day, 7 days a week, someone came and reminded you 3 words. Don't you think by the end of the week you would have mastered those words? Of course you would have, because the brain is always changing and growing. The more, the frequency, the intensity, and the duration is what makes the difference. Though the frequency means the more, several times a day, 7 days a week, several. Intensity means we're going to take all the practices we've learned already. The cell phone is there, the TV is off. This is not something we're doing while we're on the stove, while we're bathing the baby, while we're on the phone. Never going to work. The patient and the carer are as close to face as possible. We'll start with that nice deep breathing exercise, and we'll do it together. Breathing in for the count of 4, holding the breath, letting out, holding. So now we've got both those brains in a calmer, focused state. And that's why we can't do this in a multitasky, busy sort of way. We want to teach the brain something new. So we're going to prime it. Nice deep breath, quiet, really connecting. We've spoken before about the importance of connecting the brain, head brain, the heart brain, the connection between these two. We're going to learn this new skill because we know we can, because we believe in each other, and we're going on this journey together. Even if a person can't speak, they definitely can feel that. If your intention is true and loving and sincere, the heart, and that will motivate the brain. And the gut will say, what's going on here? Let's do it. So that's what's meant by intensity. It's not a once off. Here are the pencils, let's do it. Let me help your hand. Let's work on it. And duration, that's the third one, frequency, intensity, and duration. Duration means for how long. And that is going to have to be an honest journey between the caregiver and the patient. The fact is, all learning is tiring for the first time. So a half an hour session for the first time is going to be exhausting. And then you're going to come back after 2 hours and ask someone to do another half. Oh, no, it's too difficult. We're going to start with a duration of 2 or 3 minutes, clear intention, high intensity, frequent. And you will, as the caregiver, very quickly see, but this person is managing this. Maybe we can push it out to 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Or if we use our compassionate heart and our knowledge brain, you see, but this patient is getting overwhelmed or exhausted, or our keyword, this patient is getting frustrated. We've got to dial back the duration, even in shorter time, but we're never going to dial back on intensity and frequency. Because remember, imagine that person telling you that new word several times a day. Imagine tasting a new taste several times a day. It's going to be a matter of days and you're going to have mastered it. And we know this is possible for the brain injured patient as well. Now, I am not saying go from bedridden to walking. Most certainly not. I'm not saying that the caregiver should choose the activity. I'm saying there needs to be this compassionate conversation or interaction between the caregiver and the patient to honestly look, what is the need? What is the need? What is causing the most frustration for this patient? Is it biting their mouth when they try to eat? Is it not being able to do the buttons on the clothes? Is it not being able to take a pencil and just draw to entertain oneself for a few minutes? Is it the walking? Have an honest look at that, break it down again into that small caring piece, connect with the person. Without the connection, there's nothing. Without the connection, there's bullying, there's nagging, there's sulking, there's resistance, there's all kinds of things that are not going to help the brain grow new connections. So, as always, the importance of using our senses, the importance of using our eyes to carefully observe what is going on here. Where are the challenges and where are the possibilities? So I'd like that to be my final statement for the evening. Based on experience, when a family or a team or a group have gone through this trauma of a big change, like a diagnosis of cancer or a stroke, a huge amount of caring effort is put in to make things functional. What can happen is that people settle into that and they forget about the possibilities going forward. And that's just natural. We don't all go to gym every day. We don't eat healthily every day. It's very natural as human beings in a busy world to kind of neglect our potential or forget about it even a little. And so then I would propose that there be some sort of agreement or even a timeline on how are we going to grow into the potential of this brain. Because if we say, well, we're going to try, it's human nature to get stuck, and that person will never eat again properly again, or walk healthily, or speak again. Everyone settles into a comfort zone that the carer does the caring and the patient does the receiving. And that doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't meet the potential of the patient, and it's very draining for the carer, and it's unnecessary. So maybe part of that exercise, even before your first frequency, intensity, duration exercise, is the exercise of saying, so where are we going with this? What would we like? Would we like within a week or a month? I wouldn't make it longer than that. Can we stop and have a look where we are? I personally use my cell phone. It's absolutely on silent, but I take photos all the time. You would be amazed when you're in the heart of a trauma, how much information it's possible to overlook. So I take a photo in an uplifting way. Can we, when I work with the stroke patient, can we take a photo of where you are now? Give me a smile, and the smile might look like this, or let's take a photo of your hand. This is where it is. And then we get to work. And in a week's time, we take the same photo. And you might not see a big difference in a week. But let me tell you, somewhere around the third set of photos, you'll notice all kinds of little details that you never saw before. There's one elderly stroke patient I'm working with now. Her hand was horribly swollen. It's not only less swollen, it's starting to relax. Can she grasp things yet? No, she can't. Except for this finger is still painful, all other hands are starting to become coordinated. And that's what we want. And having those photographs, or if you don't have a photo, have a journal and make note. Make note of the face, the hands, the feet. I keep a little list of what sounds and what words the person can say, because it motivates to find that neuroplasticity at work and at play. The brain is always changing and growing. So I'm Julia from Rosalind Road Therapy Center. I want to encourage you that the possibilities and the potential with stroke patients is always more than the damage. And as carers, if we can stop, take care of ourselves in a way that we can help our patients grow into their potential, we can change their worlds. And by the way, when you're working with a person and you see them growing into their own potential, whether it's a baby or an old person, and that potential starts coming out, it is the most profoundly uplifting experience you could ever have. Thank you.